Stop here. This is the place.
One of the things that I love is that two films idea of your life. And there's two stories you can tell. One that is safe and full of regret, and one that is risky and full of pride and joy. This place seems to be a stepping stone across that bridge that is so scary to walk across.
Before I get into my talk, I just want to tell you a brief story about what it means to be married to Cheryl. I'm already losing it. Back after the birth of our first child, Carver, we were so poor, and we didn't have any full-time employment and no insurance. We were very much in danger of losing our house. Our accountant, who we only had because as a filmmaker, my finances, although they were not great, were very complicated. Every year would just tell Cheryl and I, okay, one of you has to get a real job. You just can't keep going like this. And yet we kept going like that. And late at night after Cheryl and our son Carver would be in bed, I would go on Craigslist and frantically look for some kind of paying job that would allow me to get like health insurance and kind of provide for the family. And I found one at an advertising agency in Portland. Nothing against advertising agencies. And so I told Cheryl, and without batting an eye, she said, if you fucking take that job, I'll never talk to you again. She said I would be miserable and it wasn't what I was meant to do. So anyway, thank you, Cheryl. I was not expecting this. This is really messing me up. In a good way, in a do way, I think. Okay, one of my earliest memories is being at a demolition derby with my dad. I was 3 years old, and we were at Portland International Raceway, and the sound was deafening. It was a really hot summer's day, and it was made hotter by the sun reflecting off the metallic grandstands. And we were all crowded together, shoulder to shoulder. And I was eating an ice cream cone, and seated next to me was a little boy about my age, maybe a little bit older. And he was looking at my ice cream cone with like laser beam intensity. And I knew in that way that kids know that this kid had it rough, and that he oftentimes found himself in the position of looking at things other people had and wondering why he doesn't get to have it. And so I whispered to my dad, can I give him my ice cream? And my dad whispered back, no, he doesn't want your ice cream. And he did it with such vehemence that I knew I had stumbled upon some kind of basic life truth that he was unwilling or unable to confront. Because I knew that that kid wanted the ice cream. That kid knew he wanted the ice cream. And I think even my dad knew that that kid wanted the ice cream. And this made me very uncomfortable, because why should I get an ice cream if he doesn't? And I was looking at the ice cream cone, looking at the boy, and looking at my dad. And just a few moments before, like, this ice cream had been everything. And now it was this burden that presented me with a moral dilemma, Am I going to contradict my dad and give the boy the ice cream, or at least a bite? And I couldn't. It overwhelmed me. The situation was too much. And so I decided to drop the ice cream. And as the boy and I watched it, like almost like in slow motion, fall underneath the grandstands, I realized that there were two kind of fundamental outlooks on life. There's the urge to share the ice cream, and there's the denial of that urge. And in this moment, I was on the wrong side of that equation, and I never wanted to be in that position again if I could help it. A few years later, my mom divorced my dad, and I don't think the ice cream incident had anything to do with it. She was a bartender, as Cheryl mentioned, and she would rely on her father, my grandfather, to watch me oftentimes. And my grandpa was a lot of fun. He loved kids, and he was just a joy to be around most of the time. Every year he would take me and my kids, or me and my friends, to see the Harlem Globetrotters or the circus. He was just really a joy. He was also a house painter, and he had the most marvelously steady hand. He could, with oil-based paint, just like paint a perfect straight line that didn't have even like a hint of a brush stroke in it. Years later, at his memorial, I found out that he had an arrangement with a lady friend of his. He would paint her house every year in exchange for sexual favors. And I found out the story from this woman's husband. But I digress. My grandfather was also a binge drinker, meaning that he could go days, weeks, even months without a drink, but once he started, he just couldn't stop. And so this led to a really kind of roller coaster-like experience where oftentimes, maybe even most of the time, my grandfather would be dependable, but sometimes he wouldn't be in kind of like a spectacular fashion. One time, my mom and I were driving to his house. He was going to watch me, and we see him weaving down the street, stumbling drunk. And there was that moment of like, holy shit, what are we going to do? And I asked my mom, are we going to stop and help him? And she just thought about it and just kind of sighed no and kept on driving. And I would notice that after episodes like that, people would look differently at my grandpa and at me. And I understood those looks because I shared the bewilderment and the anger that his drinking caused. But I also knew that my grandpa was a lot more than his weakest moments. And I found myself thinking, if only there's a way that other people could see that, if only there's a way my grandpa could see that. Sorry, I've got to take a quick drink of water. So one of the many ways in my life I've been so lucky is to have a lot of great teachers, some of them even in the classroom. And the last day of school before Christmas in my 8th grade year, my English teacher, Mr. Greenfield, showed us a film that, in retrospect, changed my life. It's a film that just follows a Florida mother through the day-to-day activities of her life. And nothing very spectacular happens in the film, and that's, I think, partly what gives it its huge power. We see Bonnie Consuelo. The film is called A Day in the Life of Bonnie Consuelo, and it was directed by Barry Spinelli. And in the film, we see Bonnie just going about the day-to-day things of what it means to be a mom. She takes her kids to school, she goes grocery shopping, she makes a meal. Nothing too earth-shattering, except for one thing. Bonnie Consuelo has no arms. And there's something about the power of that film. My voice is going again. That really stuck with me because what it made you feel was not, you quickly become aware that Bonnie isn't lacking anything, that what she has are intangibles and she has them in abundance. And it's a very powerful film. I urge you to see it. So the seed was planted in me that maybe I could use film to make an audience understand what it's like to cope with an addiction. Maybe I could do for Bonnie Consuelo what Barry Spinelli did. Maybe I could make people understand what my grandpa's life is like. Or maybe I could kind of metaphorically reach back across the years and give that boy at the demolition derby my ice cream. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few clips from my films. I'd like you to imagine that you're a 45-year-old homeless crack addict, and you've done 2 stints in prison, and you've lost the things that addiction will take from people: homes, marriages, jobs, children, self-respect. But you haven't given up. There's something deep inside you that made you get up at the crack of dawn and get in line in front of Hooper Detox Center in Portland, and luckily you got a bed. Some people aren't so lucky. They don't get a bed, they get dope sick, they use, they overdose, and they die. Okay, you've been in detox about a week, and your head is just beginning to clear. And in detox, you met a man that just might help you save your life. His name is David Fitzgerald, and he has even more wreckage than you do. Longer stretches in prison, and a 35-year drug addiction. But he's a recovery mentor with significant clean time, and in you, he sees someone who just might be done using and might be able to put to good use the clean and sober housing, drug treatment, and recovery mentorship the program offers. And so this is so you gather up all your belongings in a plastic bag and you leave detox with David. And this is a clip from Finding Normal.
you did all your time in Portland?
Did I grow up here?
I said you did all your time in Portland?
In Oregon? I did a little bit in Washington.
Never been in no California prison, huh?
No. One of my younger brothers he goes in and out of San Quentin all the time. Now I got another brother and goes to the penitentiary in Montana. He been to Deer Lodge 3 or 4 times, and another one of my brothers is probably back there in Jefferson City or one of them penitentiaries, Missouri or Kansas. My whole family was afflicted by this shit.
I'm the only one out of my family, out of 11. You know, I had 6 brothers and 5 sisters. And one of my older sisters, she been in prison. And then me, and that's it. The rest of them, they just, you know, they don't do nothing to go to jail. Well, I guess they do. They just ain't got caught.
Thank you. Okay, now I'd like you to imagine you're an inmate at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Wilsonville, Oregon, the women's prison in Oregon. And you think that you're a failure in life as a person, and especially as a mother, until, that is, you become a participant in the Family Preservation Project. And besides offering parenting classes and daily phone calls with your kids and expanded prison visits in which, unlike normal prison visits, you get to hold your child, feed them, read to them, take a nap with them, maybe most importantly, the program allows you to take a look at your life and change the story you tell yourself about your life.
Why do you suppose we're doing this exercise?
We did this exercise so we can look for where we come from, to where we are, and what we want to change in our life, and what we want for our children, or the things that we don't want from our children, or the traits that we want to pass on to our children, and the traits we don't want to pass on to our children. The consistencies of things that have happened, and maybe thinking of how we can break the cycle of whether it be addiction or abuse or whatever it may be, like just seeing the patterns in the family.
It's important to have something put out in front of you like this, because then you are more aware and you can see the things that you need to work on to break the cycle.
When I was growing up, my dad wasn't there for me. Not like that, you know, and one time my dad's now wife got drunk and told me while I was staying in the house with 3 of my kids that my dad never really even wanted me. I have this thing that I had to let go of, wanting to be bottled up and not wanting to let anybody in or know anything about me. And that was something I had to let go. And with letting go, that means opening up and sharing stuff like this, even though it might not be the best. You know, I didn't have the best life. I didn't do the best things. I want my life to be open and to be able to share with people. You know, I can't be the person that I want to be without opening up what's inside of me. This is finally where I need to be. I'm not this person that I was told so many times that I was. I'm not, you know, I'm not a hoe, I'm not a bitch, you know, I can do better. Like, no, I was told nobody wants you because you got so many kids and da-da-da, and you can't do anything. That was my life, and that's what I based my life on. And when I got into my drug use, I was nothing but a drug addict whore and da-da-da-da, but I had to change that. For me to completely change my life and to be there for my children, I had to change myself. And so that was the steps that I took to changing myself, was changing my thinking, because I'm not that person that I told that I was.
You're connecting the dots, and that's what this is all really about. Well, I think you're amazing.
Thank you.
Bring it in, crybaby.
Because you've been through a lot and you've put people through a lot, you know, you sometimes lose compassion for yourself.
I'm
And
grateful for where you are now.
right, and so understanding, you know, the path and understand making those connections and also starting to have some compassion for yourself helps you move through the guilt and the shame and all that stuff you have to move through so that you can just be present.
Midway through filming Mothering Inside, which you just saw a clip from that film, the Oregon Department of Corrections decided to defund the program even though it has a recidivism rate of zero. And so the film became a kind of rallying point. It raised public awareness, and the Oregon legislature passed a bill funding the program for 2 more years. Thank you. And a quick update on Lynetta, who you saw there. She's been out of prison for a year. She has full-time employment. She's taking college classes, and she has regained custody of all 4 of her children. So in broad strokes, Finding Normal and Mothering Inside are about kindness and its transformative power. But I think to truly understand that transformative power, it's sometimes necessary to look at the opposite of kindness. And that leads me to my next film, Alien Boy, The Life and Death of James Chassie. The film gets its title from a song that the punk band The Wipers wrote about James, who was a big part of the early Portland punk scene before mental illness took over his life. And even with severe and persistent mental illness, he maintained loving relationships with his family and maintained his independence, avoiding institutionalization and having an apartment in his beloved downtown Portland until on September 17th, 2007, he died at the hands of the Portland police.
Is an ID for James Philip Chassie. If I remember correctly, the identification had some, like maybe a library sticker.
Officer Humphreys put together a police report that described Jim as being transient when they had his Oregon ID card, which provided his address at Northwest Broadway just off of Burnside, a mere blocks from where he was found. They checked his police records and found that his address coincided with that. Rather than list him as a person living in Portland with an address, Humphreys chose to describe him as a transient. Again, I think denigrating his character and suggesting that, you know, he wasn't worthy, and it was just too bad that this druggie who was a transient got caught up with the police.
And you were feeling sympathetic towards Mr. Chassie then, weren't you?
Sympathetic towards Mr. Chassie?
I'm just asking you a question.
I wanted to get him to jail so he could get taken care of. So I popped open the door and I said, I want you to understand, if you try and bite me or kick me, it's going to be really, really bad.
And you, in fact, placed the spit hood on Mr. Chassie?
Yes. We brought him into jail. I believe I was on the left side. I asked where are we going, and one of the deputies said ISO 1. I remember I just get handcuffs off and I realized he's gone unconscious again. I look over at the deputy and I said, we need to get medical. He passed out on us before.
He stopped breathing for the second time and he's gone into seizures, correct?
That's correct.
That's a change, isn't it?
I would believe so, yes.
Yeah. That's a significant change, isn't it?
Yes.
And did you kneel down, take that spit sock off so you could see whether his eyes were open to assess his vital signs?
I did not know.
You did not?
I did not.
The officers don't disclose to the nurses anything about prior use of force, prior medical problems.
so.
You decided that you were going to take him to Portland Adventist Hospital.
That's correct.
And what did you estimate would be the time it would take?
15, 20 minutes, maybe, somewhere around there.
So you have someone who has stopped breathing twice, was seized, and you are going to transport him 15 or 20 minutes to a hospital?
Yeah, at that point, I mean, the medical unit at the jail didn't seem to be, I mean, seemed that if he would have been in serious distress for them, that they would have dealt with him.
Did you tell the nurses that he had stopped breathing once before?
No,
So they may not have had the complete picture.
that's correct.
You ever had a broken rib?
No.
You had a bruised rib?
Yes.
Painful?
Yes.
You agree that if Mr. Chassie had 12 or 16 broken ribs when you were carrying him around, that would have been extremely painful for him?
That would have been painful.
And what's your sense of the noise? Is it anger? Is he in pain? More of a defiant, angry noise. At no point during any of this did I feel like he was making noise in pain.
You don't think he ever was screaming?
I mean, it's just a choice of words, you know, making that distinction. He was definitely, it was a yell. It was. I like the word yell better.
Yeah, sorry to put you through that. I wish I could say like a lot has changed, but basically the only tangible procedural police thing that happened is that now police officers in Portland are required to call an ambulance to take someone to the hospital. None of the officers involved were in any way reprimanded, and the beat goes on. So Alien Boy premiered at the Portland International Film Festival in 2013, and my enduring memory from that night is at the after party where Portland Mayor Charlie Hales and Jim's father, James Chassie Sr., had an in-depth, kind of open-hearted discussion about ways to improve interactions between the Portland police and people coping with mental illness. And you know, that conversation may seem like a small thing, but I think it's an example of what art does. It brings people together on the level of story so that they can actually talk together as people who have been through something together, you know? And so that kind of conversation is always what I'm kind of hoping for with my films. I can't tell you how many, city commissioners or, state legislatures see Finding Nemo or Mothering Inside and say things like, oh wow, I never knew like a drug addict in their mind really wanted to change. And we kind of assume that people in this day and age have been exposed to all kinds of people, but that's not always true. You know? And so these stories can really help humanize what goes on. I feel so lucky to be able to be let into people's lives. And I think it's such a privilege, and I hope I'm aware of at least some of the awesome responsibility. I believe in the power of story. I believe in the alchemy that happens when we share our stories, and I sure thank you for letting me share mine with you today.